is the first African-American Attorney General of the United States. He served from 2009 to 2015. He is out with a new book, Our Unfinished March, The Violent Past and Imperfect Future of the Vote. Former Attorney General Eric Holder joins me coming up next.
Live from Los Angeles, this is the Special Report with Areva Martin.
Today, I'm talking with former Attorney General Eric Holder. He served as the 82nd Attorney General of the United States. He was the first Black Attorney General appointed by the first Black president. He was back in the White House yesterday for the unveiling of the official portraits of President Barack Obama and our incredible First Lady, Michelle Obama. Good morning and welcome, Attorney General Holder.
Hey, Areva, how are you doing?
I am fantastic. It is such an honor to sit down and talk with you. So much going on in the world where someone like you is the perfect person to answer so many questions. But I got to start with yesterday in the White House. What did it feel like to have, I'll call it the old gang together again? President Obama, First Lady Michelle Obama in cornrows in the White House at the official unveiling of those beautiful portraits. Black Twitter went crazy when we saw the former First Lady with her braids in the White House. But you were there in person. What was the energy like?
Well, I tell you, it was like a homecoming. It's the first time I'd been in the White House since the Obama administration. And it was a warm, uplifting event, and it was something I think in a lot of ways that the nation needed to see Barack there, to see Michelle there. Barack gave some really great remarks. Michelle was unbelievable in the remarks that she gave. It was interesting to see that she got a bit emotional there and people were dabbing at their eyes as she talked about, she wasn't supposed to be there. And then how she broadened that to say that the people all over the country are told that they're not supposed to be there. And so I thought it was just a great event. Lots of hugs, lots of kisses, everybody remarking about how great we all looked, many years after the end of the Obama administration. And, it's also something that struck me that this is something clearly should have happened, a long time ago, although I'm glad that it wasn't Donald Trump who was presiding over the ceremony. I'm glad it was, a great vice president who's turned into a great president, Joe Biden, who was able to welcome them, back to the White House.
Yeah, we saw this great clip where Obama is walking, everybody's trying to shake his hand, but he takes this moment to make sure that he shakes your hand, that he gives you, that eye contact. And what did that feel like? I know you guys have worked together. You must be close on, a certain level, but to know that amongst all the people that were there, he wanted to make sure that you, Eric Holder, were recognized in that moment.
Well, he's my guy. I'm proud to have served as the Attorney General in his administration. I think history is going to be extremely kind to Barack Obama. The achievements of the Obama administration, everything from the Affordable Care Act to the things that we did to try to reform the criminal justice system, the moral example, that he made for the country. I thought it was interesting. One of the biggest laughs he got yesterday was to say that the artist who did his portrait convinced him not to wear his tan suit. And, we all laughed at that because that was like almost a scandal. Barack Obama, the president, wears a tan suit compared to what happened with his successor. America needs to be reminded every now and again about just how truly great a president he was, what an example he was and continues to be. And obviously, he and Michelle make a formidable team. So it was great. And I was sitting right behind them. And I was also struck by the fact I saw Michelle walk in and I was sitting right behind her. And I said, "Whoa, she's got braids. This is cool. This is good. I'm sure this has never happened in the White House before."
Never. And I tell you, Black Twitter just went crazy. It erupted in just, elation. There was so much excitement. And people are still talking about it today, how great it was to see Barack and Michelle back in the White House and how normal, to see a normal president and first lady. You mentioned the Affordable Care Act. I want to ask you, you must have seen this judge in Texas who ruled just yesterday that employers can be exempt from providing coverage for very important, vital, life-saving medication for folks who have HIV. And this is the judge that has tried to do everything in his power to kill the Affordable Care Act. How does that make you feel when you were right there and saw the fight to make this coverage available for millions and millions of Americans who otherwise would not have insurance, and to see a judge who is purposely sought after by conservative lawyers to bring cases to try to undermine the ACA? What does that do to you?
I mean, that's disturbing on a whole bunch of levels. I mean, you got these lawyers who forum shop and try to put as many of these cases before this same judge or similar judges as they can, as they try to kill the Affordable Care Act. They've been unsuccessful every time they've tried to do it. They couldn't garner the necessary political support when they had a majority in the Senate. John McCain famously said that he wouldn't do it, in addition to other Republican senators. But they still want to kill the Affordable Care Act, even though it has proven to be unbelievably popular now. You notice, as Barack said, once it becomes popular, they're not going to be calling it Obamacare anymore. Now they're going to be starting to call it, the Affordable Care Act. And that's where we've gotten to the point where it is something that is accepted and relied on by the American people. And the rationale for his decision to deny these drugs that help people with HIV is that it violates the religious beliefs of employers who would have to supply it. And I asked myself, well, people can get HIV in a whole variety of ways. I assume that he's talking about sexual orientation, that he's somehow trying to tie it to that.
About promiscuity amongst, and he, calls out homosexuals. Yes, it's a homophobic, really disgraceful opinion.
But you can get HIV in a whole variety of ways. And so, I don't know how he gets the ability to slice it there. I mean, blood transplants, it's a whole variety of things. And so just on a factual basis, I don't quite understand where this judge is coming from. And certainly from a legal basis, his antipathy towards the Affordable Care Act is inconsistent with the neutral position that he's supposed to take as a judge, looking at the papers that have been filed before him and then ruling only on the merits based on the facts and the law, as opposed to any kind of political, ideological desire that he might have.
Yeah, unfortunately, it looks like we should expect more of that, because the Dobbs decision by the 6-3 majority court, I think, has opened the door for those kinds of lawsuits. But we can't have a conversation, Attorney General Holder, without talking about Donald Trump. And you mentioned the difference in that White House possible indictment of a former president for removing top secret, sensitive information, documents that belong to the United States government, not to this man who doesn't seem to understand the distinction between what's his property and what's the property of the U.S. government, found in his private residence. Even former Attorney General Bill Barr making it very clear on Fox that these were the documents of the government and that they had every right to go in with a search warrant to get them. What do you make of a president, former president, and this conduct?
Yeah, well, the conduct is obviously irresponsible. Of that, I don't think anybody can have a serious question. But the real question is whether or not that conduct is criminal. And if it is technically criminal, as I guess Attorney General Barr said, whether or not the case should be prosecuted. You have to understand that only a few people have access to this compartmented information. I was one of the people serving as Attorney General in the National Security Council who did have access to, most of this information. And it's really kind of kept close. You sign for the material when you want to read it. You give it back to somebody when you're finished with it. The thought that I would have taken that material home, for whatever reason, and certainly just to keep around in my personal office, it is really, really, really absurd. And we have some indication now that the information may involve the nuclear capacities of other nations. These are what we would call, the crown jewels of American intelligence. Puts at risk our ability to to do the kinds of monitoring through mechanical, electronic means, through human means, to garner that information that is so vital for a president to be able to make appropriate decisions. So it's inappropriate to have it. It puts at risk, intelligence gathering going into the future. And unfortunately, is too typical of who Donald Trump is and the kind of president that he was.
Everybody is thinking this. Help us understand someone, you've been the top cop of the land. If this were Obama, if this were the Obama administration and Obama was leaving office and he took boxes and boxes of these compartmentalized, these top secret documents you just identified to a private residence with the worst security ever, where people are coming and going, people, from all countries. And they took 18 months and asked him to return the documents. He had a lawyer sign an affidavit that said, hey, we've turned, everything back over to you. And then it's discovered that that's not true, that all the documents weren't returned. Do you think we'd be having this separate lawsuit that's going on where a special master is being appointed, or would there be different consequences for an Obama versus a Donald Trump?
Well, I certainly think you'd be hearing different things from, Republican senators. I think I hear, what I hear coming from the lips of, people like Marco Rubio, Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz. They'd be in a fundamentally different place. Fox News would be in a fundamentally different place. All of the conservative, pundits would be saying all kinds of negative things about the president, about President Obama. And just to be clear and make sure everybody understands this is not a problem that any president has ever had before, whether they are Republican or Democrat. And so I would not have expected anything like this to be done by a president. You would have fundamentally different reactions if this were Barack Obama. Again, they were concerned about him wearing a tan suit. Right. So, the fact that he would have in his personal possession, compartmented intelligence information would drive them just up the wall. And they'd be howling about this now, as opposed to making excuses for the irresponsible, unforgivable things that Donald Trump has done with regard to that same kind of information.
And just lastly on this point, because, I'm a political junkie and I'm sure you are too. I know you are too. We could talk politics all day, but I got to get to this book. Does the special master, the appointment of the special master, what impact will that have on the ongoing investigation that's obviously looking at what damage has been done to our national security, but also the potential for the criminal investigation?
Yeah, it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see what the Justice Department actually decides to do in the filing that they're going to have to make, I think, in the next 24 hours or so. Let's start with the opinion. The opinion by that judge is absurd. There's no factual legal basis for it. The consequences of the opinion are potentially, pretty substantial, both with regard to the ongoing criminal case and also with regard to the review that is being done of those documents, the damage assessments that's being done by the intelligence community. You've got the FBI that's involved in both components of that effort. That is the criminal investigation as well as the damage assessment. And there's an injunction that says you can't go forward with the criminal matter. So what do you do with the agents the FBI agents who are working in both? And then again, there's just not a legal basis for this. I mean, the opinion is amateurish. It cites to the notion that President Biden has not said anything with regard to the imposition of executive privilege. And in fact, he has said he doesn't want to impose or assert executive privilege. So they're factual errors. It's naive in a bunch of ways. It is, as I said, it's an absurd opinion that reflects poorly on the judge who wrote it. And it'll lead you only to a couple of conclusions. Either, she's not up to the job, or she's doing something that's either ideological or political. And that's a very disheartening thing to consider. But there's, no neutral legal scholar has said anything positive about that opinion.
I got to ask you this, Merrick Garland, a lot of fire from Democrats that are saying he's not moving quickly enough, he's not tough enough, he's not standing up to Trump. You have stood in his shoes. You've been where he is now. Do you think, he is doing the job in the way that it needs to be done? And it really comes down to indictment. Do you indict a former president? That must weigh on him very heavily. We should not take that lightly. And I'm sure he doesn't, or that office doesn't take that lightly. Yeah, no, it's,
he's got some tough decisions to make. But I think he's done a good job, to do it in the measured way in which he has proceeded, the way in which he's had the Justice Department proceed, I think is, in fact, the way to do it. And he has said, he's been sparing in his public comments, but he has said, I think, appropriate things, which is to say that he will bring a case without fear or favor. And will hold accountable whoever was responsible at whatever level of government that they served. And so I've known Merrick for, 25 years or so. He's a good lawyer. He's a decent human being. He's a good man, and he's got guts. And so at the end of the day, I think that he will look at the facts, he'll look at the law, and he'll make an appropriate decision. If there is a case against Donald Trump and he thinks that, that case should be brought, that there's a legal factual basis for it, I think that he will do that. And I think that people need to kind of back off of him and the Justice Department, because it takes time to put these cases together. The January 6th committee has done a great job, a superb job, but they only have to present evidence to the audience that's in the room and to the nation. Merrick and the Justice Department are going to be responsible for putting a case before 12 jurors and convincing them beyond a reasonable doubt that whoever is charged should be found guilty. And there will be defense attorneys who will be trying to undermine the government's case. And so it's going to take a little longer, to put the case together. But it's clear that the investigation is ongoing, and we have a pledge from an attorney general who I have great respect for, that they're going to make the call on the basis of the facts and the law and nothing other than that.
Well, that's very comforting to know, because I may have been in that group of people who was getting anxious and feeling as if we needed to move faster. But I think your words are...
Well, and I understand that, but, let's look back here. And, he ordered FBI agents into Mar-a-Lago to get documents, and think that was, that's a move that I'm sure he thought about, a great deal. They made requests, they issued subpoenas, and only did that. He only ordered that incursion into Mar-a-Lago when he felt it was absolutely necessary. And I expect you'll see that same kind of thinking when it comes to a determination about, who should ultimately get indicted, if anyone, in connection with what happened in lead up to January the 6th, what happened on January the 6th, anything that occurred after that terrible day.
Yeah, no, great for us to be reminded of that. You're right. Obviously, going into the private residence of a former president with the search warrant, FBI, knocking on doors, and we're hearing Melania say, agents rifling through her personal belongings and her, most intimate clothing, took a lot of courage. So we got to give Merrick Garland a lot of, kudos for having the courage to do that, because these aren't just legal decisions he's making, they're political decisions too, no matter how you slice it. Okay, we got to move on. We got to talk about this book, Our Unfinished March. This book, The Violent Past and Imperiled Future of the Vote, A History, a Crisis, a Plan. Had a chance to finish the book. Congratulations, Attorney General Holder, on this book. Got to ask you, I know that when you left the White House, you talked a lot about doing work to protect the vote and looking at what was happening around the nation, not just around federal elections, but state elections. But was there anything in particular that was the impetus for you to write this book?
Yeah, you're right. When I left the Department of Justice back in 2015, one of the things I said in my farewell speech was that although I was leaving the department, I was never going to leave the work. And the thing that really I wanted to focus on was protecting the right to vote. What we have seen since that time, we've seen a Republican Party that, as I say in the book, just ain't that into democracy. And they have put in place a number of measures to make it more difficult for certain people, people who they perceive to be, supporters of the Democrats, people disproportionately people of color, to make it more difficult for people to vote. And actually now with this case that is before the Supreme Court, this independent state legislature case, they want to put into the hands of these gerrymandered state legislatures the ability to ultimately decide, who should be chosen as the electors to the Electoral College. And so, I think that our democracy is under attack. There are attempts being made to move us to what I've come to call a political apartheid, where a party that has minority support would exercise majority power. And Republicans have made peace with that. They seem to be comfortable with that. And so I thought that as we approach the midterms and as we get ready for 2024, ultimately, to share some thoughts with the American people about the history of the vote, how various groups fought to get the vote, to talk about the present situation in which we find ourselves, and then to lay out some really concrete proposals about how we might go about protecting not only the right to vote, but to protect our democracy. And that's what this book is about. And that's why I kind of rushed through it over the course of, 10, 12 months to try to get it out this year before the midterms so that people would have an opportunity to look at it, understand our history, consider the proposals, and have a way in which I think, people can get a sense that although things might look bad right now, things have looked bad in the past, but Americans joined together, committed themselves, and overcame the challenges of their day. This book is about us overcoming the challenges of our time. I think we can do it.
Well, and you do that. You definitely end with some hope, because some of the beginning of the book is really painful. Yep. When we have to relive what it took for different demographics in this country to get the vote. You start off telling us about, who were the first people to get the right to vote, and white men, not all white men with money. You had to be a wealthy white man to vote. And then obviously, the struggles that women had and struggles that African Americans had to be able to vote. But when I really got excited about your book, Eric, is when you get to that part in the book where you talk about the Obama election of 2008, and boy, what happened after 2008, those 2010 midterms. Take us back there, because I think the book, from your perspective, those 2010 midterms are very instructive for us in terms of what we're witnessing now in 2022. Everything from who's on the Supreme Court to the judges at the federal district level, the state legislatures that are enacting these, oppressive laws around women's reproductive rights. All of that, in many ways, started because of those 2010 midterms. So tell us, why those 2010 midterms were so important.
Yeah, I think people underestimate or tend to forget the reaction to Barack Obama's election. And the run up to the election was about hope. It was about change. America felt good about itself. He's sworn in January of 2009. And I think what happened there, that multiracial effort that put him in office by a very wide margin, was frightening to a whole bunch of people, in particular to the Republican Party. Mitch McConnell famously said, "We're going to make sure that he's a one-term president." And the Tea Party rose, and they came out against Barack with regard to nominally the Affordable Care Act. But I think the opposition to him was actually greater than any one specific legislative proposal. It was really a reaction to this representative of a changing America, a different America. And that's what really generated the intensity of the opposition to him. That opposition led to, as he described it, a shellacking in 2010 for Democrats. And Republicans took over the House of Representatives, Senate, and also importantly, and people didn't focus on this enough, state legislatures around the country. And that led to, the gerrymandering that occurred in 2011, which set the tone for the course of the whole decade. These state legislatures that were badly gerrymandered in a partisan and racial way passed a whole bunch of bills that were inconsistent with the desires of the people in those states. But because these representatives were in these safe districts, they didn't suffer any electoral consequence. And that led to a whole bunch of things. I mean, you see it even today when we're still feeling the echoes of that 2010 election and the redistricting that came after it, where you see passed in states around the country these anti-choice laws, these anti-reproductive rights laws that are not supported by the people in those states. But these extreme Republicans pass these bills knowing that they're in these safe seats and they will face no electoral consequence. And all of this can be tied back to that 2010 election, the 2013 Supreme Court decision that gutted the Voting Rights Act. Those are the two seminal things in the early part of the decade that we're still feeling the impact of right now.
And you talk in the book, Eric, about the two main things that are impacting the vote, one being voter suppression, and then the second being gerrymandering. And in those 2010 elections, you say in the book, over 700 statewide seats were won by conservatives, and states across this country that were blue or even purple now were controlled by these conservative majorities. I'm in the state of Missouri as we are having this interview, and majority, not even just a majority, it's a super majority in the Missouri state legislature. And they're facing just a barrage of bills, anti-choice bills, anti-LGBT bills, bills that really, would take the residents of the state of Missouri, back decades in terms of rights that they have enjoyed. Help us understand, how do we get back? You mentioned the 2013, the Shelby decision, where the Voting Rights Act is essentially gutted. Section 5, that section that allowed the Department of Justice to review any substantial changes to voting rights laws in states. Can we ever get back to where we were with Section 5, given the court that we now have, the 6-3 majority, conservative majority court?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we have to do is, this is going to be at base, I think, a political effort. We've got to win elections. Progressives and Democrats have to win elections. And if you do that, if, for instance, the Democrats were able to hold on to the House, increase their margins in the Senate by just a couple of senators, and I think that's entirely possible, you could pass a new Voting Rights Act that would meet the concerns of the Supreme Court in that, I think, terribly decided Shelby County case of 2013, but pass a new Voting Rights Act that would pass constitutional muster once it would be considered by the Supreme Court. And I think we have the opportunity to make this new Voting Rights Act, and it was what was considered passed by the House, didn't get past the Senate because a couple of senators didn't want to do away with the filibuster. But you'd have an opportunity to create a Voting Rights Act that wouldn't focus on the states in the old Confederacy, but that would be nationwide in scope. And I think the reality is that with regard to the need for voter protection, it's not just, Texas and Georgia and states in the South. You've also got to look at what's going on in Ohio, what's going on in Wisconsin, what Republicans try to do in Michigan and in Pennsylvania. This is something that has to be nationwide in scope. And if there is a successful political effort, if the margins are expanded at the federal level, I think we can put in place a revitalized and better Voting Rights Act. And if we are successful in our politics at the state level, we can undo a lot of the negative things that Republican-controlled and gerrymandered state legislatures have put in place. People tend to think that once these bills are passed at the state level, that they're there forever. And if you look at Virginia, what happened was after the gerrymandering was unwound there, and Democrats took over the state legislature, you had a Democratic governor, they undid all those unfair voter suppression laws, made it easier to vote, made mail-in balloting something that was an easy thing to do. And I think Virginia is a really good example of, if you give Democrats and progressives power, a lot of the negative, undemocratic things that the Republican Party has put in place in other states can be undone.
So, Eric, we're talking about voting, we're talking about the midterm elections, and you said if we just win elections, easier said than done. You look at someone like Liz Cheney. She couldn't win. Not only could she not win her seat back in Congress, she was beat by a landslide. Right. So what we would call normal, traditional Republicans can't win. They definitely can't get past these tough primaries. And we're seeing these Republicans run in these primaries at most extreme positions ever, and then scrub their websites as they move into the general, scrub Donald Trump's name, scrub all of their, pro-life rhetoric from their websites. So how do we just win, particularly when someone like Donald Trump still looms so large amongst the Republican Party? Some call it the Trump Party. And, I'll call her, normal. Again, normal Republicans like Liz Cheney can't win. Stacey Abrams in Georgia, in trouble.
Right.
Herschel Walker, running ahead in some polls of, Raphael Warnock. How is that even possible? How do we live in a world where Herschel Walker, who can't understand what happens with the air, could be running neck and neck with, Warnock? So these midterms have a lot of us nervous, about maintaining what we have indefinitely. The notion that we could, gain some seats in the Senate or gain some seats in the Congress. What's your sense about that?
No, Areva, you raise a good point. And I don't want people to think that I'm saying this is going to be easy. When I say that we need to win elections, this is going to be difficult. They have made it difficult for us to, and when I say us, I'm talking about, people of color, people who are perceived to be Democratic leaning, people in cities, young people. They've made it difficult for us to get to the polls, to have our ballots counted in a fair way. And so this will not be easy. But the thing about the book, which I hope everybody will get out there and buy. The book talks about how in previous generations, there were difficulties that other generations had to overcome. Now, I'm sure that Dr. King didn't think he was always going to be successful in ripping down a system of American apartheid, racial apartheid. There must have been moments, late at night where he thought to himself, am I going to be able to do this? I talk about the suffragettes, women fighting for the right to vote. They had to imagine an America that never really existed. And nevertheless, they were successful, were beaten, jailed, a whole variety of things done to them, but they persevered. And so that's the kind of intensity, that's the kind of spirit that we have to bring to the effort to confront the challenges that are now ours. And I think if we are committed, if we participate in the electoral process at its most basic level, everybody's got to register and everybody's got to vote. Everybody's got to make sure that your friends, relatives, acquaintances are registered and that they vote. Yeah, and people might have to unfairly wait in lines. We're not going to have as much access to mail-in voting as I think is appropriate. But we've got to be prepared to do the hard things in order to make sure that we save our democracy. If we're prepared to do the hard things, if we commit ourselves, if we sacrifice, I ultimately think that we'll be successful. But you're absolutely right, Areva, and people need to understand. Don't think that I'm being some naive guy here. This is going to be difficult. They have made it so. They have made it difficult. But I think that we are up to the challenge, just as generations of Americans before have been up to the challenges of their time.
Yeah, in the book, Unfinished March, subtitle, A History of Crisis, a Plan, you do have a plan. And you lay out in the book some very concrete and seemingly logical solutions to some of these really, seemingly, just unsolvable problems, starting with the Supreme Court. You talk about both perhaps a temporary expansion of the court as well as term limits. And we know the Biden administration had a commission that was convened to study possible reforms to the Supreme Court. Do you think there is an appetite amongst the Democratic Party, not just the progressive wing of the party that has been clamoring for an expansion of the court, but really I'll call it those moderate, those centrist Democrats? Do you think there's an appetite to really do anything, assuming we maintain our seats in the House, we pick up a few seats in the Senate, we have Joe Biden for 2 more years? Do you think in the last 2 years of his term, there could be some movement of temporarily expanding the court or doing something like term limits? You talk about 18 years as being an appropriate time. But I got a kick out of a passage in the book about our founding fathers and this notion as to why Supreme Court justices should have lifetime tenure, not thinking that people would be living to be 80 and 90 years old, and you literally could be on the court for 30 or 40 years. 40-year-old people, when the founding fathers were writing, dead or, near dead. So it was no sense that they'd be around this long. So, not necessarily the case that the founding fathers expected Clarence Thomas to be on the court for 35 years, giving Democrats hell, which is what he has pledged to do. So, back to the question about the appetite amongst Democrats to get something done. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that first off, when it comes to term limits, I say 18 years, as I note in the book, I think a surprising way, Chief Justice Roberts has said that he thinks 15-year terms are appropriate. There is widespread support among the American people for term limits. Nobody should serve 30, 40 years, have that much power in an unelected position in our government. If senators who serve 20, 30 years, whatever, that's fine. People vote them in, you can vote them out. You put these, late 40s, early 50-year-olds on the court with the thought that they're going to, the presidents put them there with the thought that they're going to be on the court for 30 or 40 years. I think so. That's wrong. So I think there's popular support for that. And I think of all the things I talk about, that's one that potentially could actually happen. And I think relatively quickly. Court expansion, I think is more difficult, and whether or not there's going to be the necessary political support within the Democratic Party, I think will be measured. You can measure it now, measure it where it was maybe, say, 18 months or so ago. I think there's more support for it now after the Dobbs decision, after the gun decision, after the climate decision in the Supreme Court. In this next term, the court is likely to do something negative with regard to affirmative action, with regard to the remaining parts of the Voting Rights Act. And so I think that you will see, this court with this 5-1-3 court is really likely to do a whole range of things that I think will generate support for the things that I talk about in the book, which is that temporary expansion, 18-year terms, the guaranteed appointment of Supreme Court justices in the first and third years of any presidential term, so that we get away from this notion that people retire when only a president of their party is there to pick their replacement. Because you're right. I mean, the founding fathers thought that, we put people on the court for life and they would live, 50, 60 years, whatever it is, and that they wouldn't be there forever. People in the early parts of America, early parts of the Republic, in the early stages of the Republic, people in the Supreme Court left the Supreme Court when they died, not because of resignation, but when they died. And now we have, as I said, these resignations that are timed for political reasons. It's Justice Kennedy. He stayed on the bench until there was a Republican there to pick his successor. And to be fair, Justice Breyer, same thing. He left when there was a Democrat in the White House to pick his replacement. And the Supreme Court, as a result, has become politicized. It is not seen in the neutral way that it has been for, I think most of our history. And the court as an institution has suffered. So I think it's time for serious reform at the court. Limit the number of years you can serve, expand the court for now, because we have to deal with the fact that the Republicans stole 2 seats, one of which should have been Merrick Garland's, and then, rushing Amy Coney Barrett onto the court. Those are 2 seats that were stolen by Mitch McConnell and the Republicans.
Yeah, a big part of this plan, obviously, is going to require us to have control of the House, control of the Senate, and have a president in the White House as well. I'm sure you have heard, you've read all of the pleas by certain parts of the Democratic Party to replace Joe Biden as the candidate for 2024. People are saying, hey, Joe just isn't in step with where at least, some parts of the party are. How dangerous do you think that would be for Democrats in 2024 to think about, replacing Joe Biden? And is there a Democrat that comes to mind to you that you think could win, assuming Trump is on the ticket, assuming DeSantis is on the ticket for the Republicans?
Yeah, well, I think that, Democrats need to, let's give, President Biden credit for what he has done in terms of, to the extent that the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, for lack of a better term, is concerned about Joe Biden on any specific issue. I think you have to look at the totality of what he has done. He has put in place a whole range of really progressive put in place a whole range of progressive programs, from climate to the COVID relief bill. I mean, he's done a whole bunch of things that a lot of other presidents try to do, and that he has been successful in bringing about. Now, he'll make up his own mind about what he will do in 2024. But I certainly think if he decides that he wants to run in 2024, he's going to be able to point to a very substantial record of achievement. I would also warn Democrats that history tells us that when you challenge the reelection effort of a sitting president, that doesn't do well for the party that is trying to hold on to the presidency. You think about Jimmy Carter with Ted Kennedy. You think about Pat Buchanan and the effort that he made, and the impact that it had on the Republicans and their efforts to hold on to the White House. And so, at base, what I want to try to do is make sure that we have in place a Democratic president, expand our margins in the Senate and in the House. And then continue the work that is being done by this administration.
Yeah, I am with you 100% on that, Eric. I think people have some notion that presidents are, like fairy godmothers or fathers, and that they can wave a magic wand and in less than 2 years solve all of the problems that they have inherited when they come into office. And I spend a lot of time trying to help people be more mature about politics and recognize that, it's a game of compromise. You never get everything that you want, but you have to be mature enough to accept a win for a win and celebrate a win. And I think sometimes we don't do that. And this president, as you said, has just done some things that, were unthinkable. Student loan debt, we can start there. The list is pretty long. Kamala Harris, Ketanji Brown Jackson, we could just call the roll on things that have happened under the watch of Joe Biden that have never happened, even when we had, our beloved President Obama in office. I got to let you go, but I got to ask you, you've written a book. I know you're back at your law firm practicing back at Covington. You're out, you're talking about voting and working on issues around voting in states across this country. But at one point, it was rumored that you were going to run for office. Now, I say rumored because I didn't hear it from you directly, but any chances that, after you have done touring the country with this book, and after you've done some other things that are important to you, that you may consider some form of public office?
I don't know. I mean, who knows? You never want to say never. I mean, my focus now is on making sure that our voting system is more fair, that our democracy is protected. What that leads me to, I don't know. But I want to try to do as much as I can to get people galvanized and focused on these very important issues, and for people to understand that, our democracy is at risk. Dr. King said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But here's the deal. It doesn't bend on its own. It only bends when people decide that they're going to put their hands on that arc and pull it towards justice. And so, to the extent that I can help in that effort, I certainly want to do that. The time is now. We have to focus on what's going on in the present if we want to have a better future. And so I'll think about my future, later on. I'm focused on 2022. I'm focused on September of 2022, November of 2022. Let's make sure that we do all that we can to save our democracy.
Well, you heard it here. It's a maybe. President Holder has a certain ring to it. So you said never say never.
You said that. No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
Well, look, I'm a lawyer, so we're real good at interpreting things that other people say. So I just want to thank you again. You 82nd Attorney General of the United States, first African-American Attorney General appointed by our first African-American president. He has a new book out. It's called Our Unfinished Business: The Violent Past and Imperiled Future of the Vote, A History, a Crisis, a Plan. Thank you so much, Attorney General Holder, for all the work that you do around the country. Thank you for this book. Thank you for being an incredible Attorney General. I mean, you were just an incredible Attorney General, and we owe a lot to you. The entire country does. And it's my honor and privilege to spend some time with you this morning.
You're too kind. It was great to speak with you. Thanks, Areva.
All right, be well. Well, I've been talking to Attorney General Eric Holder. He has this new book out. Make sure you pick up a copy of it. Our Unfinished March. This is an incredible book. I recommend it to anyone. You're a student of history, you're a political junkie, you're a news junkie, you are concerned about our democracy, you're concerned about voting rights in this country. This is a must pick up book for everyone who should be concerned about our democracy, because our democracy belongs to us and we all play a role in ensuring that it is intact. Again, Attorney General Eric Holder, Our Unfinished March. All right, y'all, that's it for me. Be well out there, be safe, and remember, we're all in this together.